Hey, it's Hunt. You found Hunt on Saints. We're talking black and gold football. Do us a favor. Hit the like button, share your comments below, and hit that subscription button so you can get all of our content. Enjoy. I got the news over the weekend that Isaac Yiadom has agreed to terms with the San Francisco 49ers. We talked about this back on Friday, that he was visiting Washington. Turns out that the better offer came from San Francisco. So Isaac Yiadom is on his way out west. We talked about on Friday, the Saints don't have a ton of depth and assets at a lot of the positions. They don't have a ton of depth at wide receiver. They don't have a ton of depth on the offensive line. They don't have a ton of depth at linebacker. They don't have really anyone that's been an established pass rusher. But at secondary, they did have some assets. You've got Marshon Lattimore. You've got Paulson Adebo. You've got Alontae Taylor. You had Isaac Yiadom. And then in the secondary, you've got Jordan Howden and Tyrann Mathieu. Like, you have some depth there. And so the thought was maybe you can move on from Marshon Lattimore and you can recoup some draft picks to help plug some of these holes in your roster. He's probably the best player that you have that would demand a return. You weren't going to be able to get anything for Michael Thomas. You probably can't get much for Alvin Kamara. But for Lattimore, probably can. And so I would entertain that thought. But now with Yiadom moving on, your depth is kind of taking a hit, and I don't think you're going to move on from Marshon Lattimore at this point. Like, I would have been okay. It's not as good as if you have Lattimore, but I would have been okay with the secondary that had Adebo and Taylor on the outside, with Yiadom playing a lot in the nickel. He did a good job for the Saints playing inside cornerback last year. It's a 27-year-old that was credited for 14 passes defense. He made 37 tackles. Like, he's a capable player in the NFL. And if you could have traded Marshon Lattimore and picked up 2 draft picks, maybe a player and a pick, and plugged 2 different holes by moving on from Lattimore, I would have said, okay, I can get on board with that. Now that you don't have the depth you did because Yiadom's moved on, I'm looking at this going, you need to keep Marshon Lattimore around. You need him to be your number one corner and kind of leave the pieces where they were last year before injury started to happen. And that means Adebo on one end, Taylor playing the nickel and the dime, Mathieu back behind him, and then probably Howden in there at safety as well. Jeff Duncan made an interesting comment about moving on from Marshon Lattimore and saying that it was a bad idea because the return for corners has not been great in the NFL. He cited a couple of examples of guys that were traded and what you were able to get for them. Jalen Ramsey was one of them. And Ramsey, who's probably a better corner than Marshon Lattimore, you ended up getting a reserve offensive lineman in a mid-round pick. You got a third rounder and then a tight end that didn't really play. That's what they got for Jalen Ramsey. So it stands to reason that, like, maybe all you could get for Marshon Lattimore would be 6th-round pick. And is that really worth it? I mean, Justin Fields just got moved for a 6th-round pick. He's a quarterback. Teams just aren't as willing to part with high-end draft picks as they once were. So I'm open to exploring all types of options for New Orleans in terms of fixing their roster, which has a lot of holes on it. And that includes looking at what a return could be for Marshon Lattimore. But when you look at the market, you see what's happened, and then you see this news of Isaac Yiadom moving on, it seems to me now even less likely that the Saints will move on from Marshon Lattimore because they need him with the numbers in the secondary, and 2, because the return probably isn't great. So I would have loved if the Saints could keep Isaac Yiadom around. I thought he played very admirably last year, but this is part of the deal with the salary cap situation is the Saints just don't have a lot of money to sling around. And you've got to prioritize where you're going to spend it. And a depth piece in the secondary, probably not going to warrant very much money from New Orleans at this point. There are teams out there that have $30, $40 million to spend. The Saints aren't really one of them. And so San Francisco is able to swoop in and pick them up. That's a really well-run organization over there. They know what they're doing. So the Saints are still fine at secondary. You've got enough pieces there to get into camp. And I don't think it's something they need to necessarily address in the draft. They need to deal with wide receiver, need to deal with tackle, need to deal with pass rusher. Is the signing of one linebacker enough with Willie Gay? Like, I don't know. They may have to address that as well. But I don't think cornerback is a place where you're going to see really any movement. And I expect Marshon Lattimore to stick with the team. And they'll have to address some other needs another way. I'm trying to find a way to get the Saints more draft picks to fill more holes and get young, cheap players. That's all we talk about with New Orleans Saints. They've got to get younger and they've got to get cheaper. But it's hard to trade from what they've got right now and recoup anything of value. And I think that's what you're kind of learning at this point. So free agency continues to churn. Saints doing their bargain shopping at this point. Didn't have enough between the couch cushions to go get Isaac Yiadom. Can't make that happen. So he'll head out to San Francisco. You look at the New Orleans secondary at this point. You've got Paulson Adebo. You've got Marshon Lattimore. You've got Alontae Taylor. You've got Rejon Wright, J.T. Gray, Faion Hicks, and we'll see what they can do in veteran free agency to maybe supplement that and bring in some guys to compete in camp. But the front end of your secondary is pretty well settled, and Isaac Yiadom is not going to be a part of that. So, hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.